This is why 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half. This is why Amazon and other major corporations pay 0 in federal taxes. We need to get money out of politics.
It's not surprising to me, but it is incredibly encouraging and important to me that more people know these numbers, especially as, President Biden and Democratic officials continue to cite American Jews and the notion of Jewish safety as the reason that they're supporting Israel's continued offensive in Gaza. And it's just clear that that's not what significant numbers of people in our community want. And it's so offensive. And I would even say that it endangers Jewish people that we are continuously used as the justification for American support of this war.
In our video for you today on the news, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders goes after one of Kamala Harris's billionaire donors, and Simone Zimmerman, a co-founder of If Not Now, one of the Jewish groups helping lead the fight to end Israel's war and apartheid against Palestine, talks about how most Jewish Americans don't agree with the U.S. political establishment's stance on Israel. Let's get started with Bernie Sanders going after one of Kamala Harris's billionaire donors. Bernie Sanders said the following: "Here's why we have to overturn Citizens United and end big money in politics. Billionaire Reid Hoffman donated $7 million to the Harris campaign. Now he wants her, as president, to fire an outstanding member of the Biden administration, FTC Chair Lina Khan. Not acceptable." To give you an idea of who Lina Khan is, let's take a look at her discussing non-compete clauses with Bernie Sanders.
So a non-compete clause is a provision in a lot of people's employment contracts that basically says, even once you leave your current job, for a certain number of years, you cannot go work for a competitor. And these clauses started off in the boardroom, mostly applying to executives, but in decades they've proliferated. And so you have fast food workers.
All right, stop there. Fast food worker. Not talking about the CEO of a major company now. You're talking about a fast food worker is what? Prohibited from going to another fast food worker?
Exactly. Fast food workers, security guards, janitors.
All right, everybody understand what you're saying. You work, hypothetically, at McDonald's, flipping hamburgers, and you what, prohibited from going to Burger King across the street?
That's right. You could say for 5 years, you can't go work for a competitor within a particular area.
And this because you're going to reveal top secrets to the Burger King?
There are a whole set of arguments the companies make, including that they need to protect trade secrets, that they can't allow sensitive competitive information to be disclosed.
How sensitive is flipping hamburgers?
So look, I think especially in some of these areas, it's difficult to see what a legitimate justification is. But interestingly, we've seen these crop up all sorts of places. So last year, the FTC proposed to ban non-compete clauses in the vast majority of employment contracts. We got over 22,000 comments, including not just from your fast food workers and your security guards, but also from doctors, from nurses, from engineers.
How does it work? I'm a nurse at a hospital. What do I have to sign?
You have to sign a contract that limits you from leaving and working for a competing hospital. And we've actually heard from some healthcare workers that during the pandemic, when over a period of weeks and months, the pandemic was flaring up in different parts of a particular state, and doctors wanted to go where their help was most needed. But in practice, some doctors were not able to do so because of the non-competes. And so we've seen that these non-competes hurt workers. Our team estimated that collectively, American workers' wages are up to $300 billion less than they would be if you didn't have these non-competes. We also hear that this is bad for small businesses because oftentimes, if a business wants to enter a market and grow, they might not be able to hire relevant workers because they're all locked up by the existing big companies.
What is the status of your investigation?
So we proposed a rule. We got thousands of comments. Our team has been reviewing these comments, and in the coming weeks, we'll be able to share how we're finalizing that rule.
And guess what? According to NPR, Lina's FTC ended up banning non-compete agreements for nearly all jobs in the U.S. Now let's take a look at the impact Lina's FTC had in lowering the prices of prescription drugs.
You have been dealing with something called the Orange Book. You're one of 3 people in America who knows what the Orange Book is. What have you been doing? What is the Orange Book? How does that have to do with manipulating the patent system, etc.?
The Orange Book is this obscure repository of patents. And what it means is if a big pharma company lists their patent in the Orange Book, they can automatically block competition. They can keep generics out of the market.
This is a new development, right? So-called.
Yes, a new development. Say there's a new company on the market that wants to offer the same drug but at a lower price, right, at a cheaper price.
So what did a pharmaceutical company do to prevent that?
They can list in the Orange Book their patent in a way that will block that newer, cheaper company from coming onto the market. And what our team at the FTC found was that there are all sorts of medical products that have been around for decades. Take the inhaler, the asthma inhaler. Over 40 million Americans rely on asthma inhalers. These inhalers have been around since the 1950s. And in America, people routinely pay over $500 for an inhaler, even though in other countries, consumers are paying as little as $20. And so our team took a close look.
Let me interrupt you. Everybody hear that? $500, $20. Continue.
Our team took a close look, and we believed that one reason companies were able to do this is because they were listing bogus patents in the Orange Book. And so last fall, we sent them letters saying we think these patents are illegitimately listed. Under your leadership, the Senate Help Committee also made clear to these asthma inhaler manufacturers that there may have been some patent tricks going on. And as a result, a whole set of these companies, 3 of the 4 manufacturers, recently announced that they're either delisting these patents and are going to cap how much Americans pay out of pocket to no more than $35, which is pretty remarkable, but also quite troubling that it took so long to get here, and that for years, Americans have been paying inflated prices for these essential products.
That is who one of Kamala Harris's billionaire donors wants Kamala to get rid of. In relation to this, Bernie Sanders also said the following: Kamala Harris is not going to win this election, and she is going to have a very difficult time winning unless she begins to speak forcefully about the needs of the long-neglected working class of this country. This whole situation reminds me of when Bernie Sanders called out his primary opponents for running corrupt campaigns during a 2020 Democratic primary debate.
Senator Sanders.
I am rather proud, maybe, I don't know, the only candidate up here doesn't have any billionaire contributions. But you know what I do have? We have received more contributions from more individuals than any candidate in the history of the United States of America at this point in an election, averaging $18 apiece. Now, there's a real competition going on up here. My good friend Joe, and he is a good friend, he's received contributions from 44 billionaires. Pete, on the other hand, is trailing. Pete, you only got 39 billionaires contributing. So, Pete, we look forward to you. I know you're an energetic guy and a competitive guy to see if you can take on Joe on that issue. But what is not a laughing matter, my friends, this is why 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half. This is why Amazon and other major corporations pay 0 in federal taxes. We need to get money out of politics. We should run our campaigns on that basis.
Now let's get to Simone Zimmerman talking about how most Jewish Americans don't agree with the U.S. political establishment's stance on Israel.
I'm going to talk to you to begin with what I think is a really, really fascinating poll, which has been conducted by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. It's really interesting. It's about the attitudes of Jewish Americans. So, for example, it says, what was your opinion regarding President Biden's decision to withhold arms shipments to Israel if Israel invades Rafah? So this was a few weeks ago now. And strongly agree, 22.5%, agree, 30%. So most agreed. Most Jewish Americans agreed with that, with disagreeing and strongly disagreeing only together about a fifth. So there was a quarter neither agreed nor disagreed. And also very interestingly, Israel has been accused of genocide by pro-Palestinian activists. Do you agree with that contention? Strongly agree, 12.5%. Agree, 17.42%. So that's approaching 30%. Amongst younger Jewish Americans, it was 39%. Nearly 4 in every 10 younger Jewish Americans think Israel is committing genocide. What's your take on those findings? Are you surprised, firstly? And what do you think it says about the way that Jewish American opinion is presented?
I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised for a couple of reasons. The first is that actually polling has previously showed similar trends in the American Jewish community, despite the fact that still the loudest people in our community, the people with the most power, are from that more conservative swath of the Jewish community that conflate anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, whose primary political goal is shielding the Israeli government from accountability for war crimes. We've seen time and again that they actually don't represent, like the polling shows that they don't actually represent significant numbers of American Jews. And, in 2021, there was a poll that came out that actually also said that 40% of young Jews believed Israel was an apartheid state, and 30% of young Jews, or maybe it was in the 20, it was around 20 to 30% of young Jews already thought that Israel was committing a genocide against Palestinians before. This is, years ago, before Israel was actually now agreed by many human rights organizations, by the International Court of Justice, as possibly committing a genocide in Gaza, right? So we've actually seen these numbers already moving for many years. We saw young people also say in that poll that they saw Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people through the lens that they understood racism in America. So what we're also talking about is a generation whose relationship with Israel is very much a part and parcel of their broader commitment to racial and economic justice. That's not the perspective that the American Jewish establishment takes. That's not the perspective of a group like AIPAC or the Anti-Defamation League. These groups that are given a lot of status as the kind of spokespeople of our community. But of course, it's not surprising to me, but it is incredibly encouraging and important to me that more people know these numbers, especially as President Biden and Democratic officials continue to cite American Jews and the notion of Jewish safety as the reason that they're supporting Israel's continued offensive in Gaza. And it's just clear that that's not what significant numbers of people in our community want. And it's so offensive. And I would even say that it endangers Jewish people that we are continuously used as the justification for American support of this war.
Because you mentioned Joe Biden then, he said no Jew in the world would be safe without Israel. So do you think, is this kind of example of non-Jewish, very pro-Israeli figures who will talk about Jewish opinion and what's best for the interests of Jewish people in a way that actually doesn't interact with the sorts of findings I've just read out there?
Yeah, the first thing that is always important to say about this is American Jews, President Biden should be keeping Jews safe in America because he's the president of right? Because we are Americans. That's why we should be safe here. Not because we have a nation state overseas that is massacring another people in the name of our safety. And I think that President Biden's position is also just in line with an older generation of American Jews who, saw Israel as weak and vulnerable, who did not engage at all with the existence of Palestinians, with the Palestinian reality. And, as Israel's occupation and apartheid has become harder to ignore and deny, those people are more in touch with where just the majority of our community are.
It's interesting. There's about 7.5 million Jewish Americans, quite almost the exact same size as the Jewish population of Israel.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of, because politically, instinctively, the Jewish community has always been relatively progressive, and certainly has rejected the Republican Party in repeated presidential elections and other national elections in the United States. But has a schism broken up, do you think? How much is a generational divide, as you say, between older Jewish Americans who tend to be Democrats, but who have a certain attachment to the state of Israel, and younger Jewish Americans who you're increasingly seeing, you're all the co-founder, if not now, after all, involved in these sorts of mobilizations against what Israel is doing, obviously, to Gaza.
Look, we've always had American Jews who have dissented against Israeli government policies. You know, there's this amazing new book called Our Palestine Question. It's actually like sitting here right behind me. But this academic who wrote about these very passionate debates that took place in the American Jewish community around the founding of the State of Israel, prominent rabbis and community members who were vehemently anti-Zionist, who, you know, saw the Palestinian refugee problem as something that they were committed to directly because of not just their Jewish values, but their own experiences, you know, being very close to the immigrant experience in America. And it's such a tragedy to me that over the last many decades, there has been this, you know, hegemony that is formed in the American Jewish community and in the American political establishment that has aimed really to like squelch out those traditions of dissent and debate, and to push anybody who challenges this very narrow right-wing, you know, conception of how America should relate to Israel out of the American Jewish consensus. And so, yeah, as you know, I'm part of a generation of young people who, as we've seen, you know, these repeated assaults on the Gaza Strip in the last decade, certainly right now is a watershed moment, just horrors beyond what even those of us, you know, who've been following this issues for years could have even imagined. It's such a breaking moment, and I think we're seeing just so many Jewish young people who are outraged that there are these institutions who speak on our behalf and are being used as cover for, you know, positions that we just find so egregiously offensive and sickening.
Also in Palestinian news, in response to Sky News tweeting out, an Israeli airstrike has hit a school in Gaza, reportedly killing at least 30 people so far. UK Member of Parliament Zara Sultana said the following: "End all arms sales to Israel now.